Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. I've got another painting guide for you today. I'm using the Wargames Atlantic British Rifleman plastic kit, but rather than paint them as the famous 95th, I'm going to paint this guy as a member of the Royal American 60th Rifles. The 5th Battalion served in the Peninsular War during the Napoleonic period. The history of the regiment goes back to the 18th century in America, hence the title. The 5th Battalion, according to what I've read, was raised partly in Barbados, but also the Isle of Wight. Very highly thought of by Wellesley, the soon-to-be Duke of Wellington, and performed well as skirmishing units taking out officers with their Baker rifles. I've primed the model with some Colour Forge Raven Black, which is actually a deep grey, and this provides a decent base for leaving shadows on the model. I will do a very brief highlight of the whole model just now with some Army Painter Fanatic deep grey, just on a dry brush. It's a very quick way to add a highlight to things like the peak of the shackle, things that will be staying that sort of black colour, and it's just going to mean that when we apply the other paints as well, if they're on a raised surface, they'll have a slightly lighter finish. So while the deep grey on my palette is still wet, I'm going to paint a layer on the coat, which is rolled up on top of the pack here. Trying to avoid the straps where I can. With some Army Painter Fanatic Angel Green, I'm going to pick out his jacket, trying to avoid straps, cuffs, collars. Another area that's going to end up with this green base coat is the plume on the shackle, and also the cord around its circumference there. You could do these overalls in a deep green, but I'll be painting them different colour later on. Speaking of overalls, I'm going to pick these out in Army Painter Fanatic Brigandine Brown. This sort of represents some locally made cloth picked up in Spain. Quite often you'll see pictures of Peninsular War units in trousers of all sorts of colour, because they wore out on campaign, and what was available locally tended to be a dark brown. Sometimes the 60th Rifles, you might see them with a pair of dark blue breeches tucked into their boots. Plastic models in this kit are all wearing these overalls though, but I don't think anyone would begrudge it too much if you painted a pair in dark blue. Perhaps they could have been nicked from some French light infantry units. So far the paint scheme has kind of been what you expect for the 95th Rifles, but I'll start to differentiate the uniform details of the 60th Rifles with some red facings. So Army Painter Fanatic Resplendent Red. So we've got pointed cuffs to paint, and we also have straps on the shoulder, collar, and you don't see much of the turnbacks, but you can kind of see the start of them on the front of the body. On this model, it's a bit too, not enough space to jam my brush in underneath there for the other side, but you're not going to see that on the model. So finish off the cuffs and collars. Got a bit of equipment hanging off his torso, so a canvas bag to pick out. So I'm using worn stone from the Army Painter Fanatic range. The strap of this one is running from his right shoulder down to left waist. Try and pick that out. Switch down to a Army Painter character brush, which is about a size 0. There's 2 straps here, one over the top will be a leather one going to the canteen, which I'll pick out later. It's not a big deal if that one gets painted with this lighter colour, because you can just paint over it. The canteen, which is this circular object above the canvas bag, using crystal blue to base coat that. Going back to the Brigandine brown I had out earlier, and pick out the leather straps. Also done his hair with this colour. There's also a leather strap going over the top of a black strap, so I'm just leaving that in the primer colour. For the wood of the Baker rifle, I'm using Fanatic Tree Ancient. You could just use Brigandine Brown if you want to keep to fewer paints. I just think a slightly different colour for the wood and the cloth makes sense. Base coat colour for his skin is Agate skin. Again, Army Painter, pretty much exclusively using Army Painter on this model. Primer accepted. On the pack and holding the coat on, there are some straps. I'm using matte white to pick these out, just to help them stand out against the dark material of the pack and the coat. Got some plate mail metal for picking out some of the steel on the rifle. Another thing which I carefully pick out is buttons. Not the easiest to get to, and on this model, particularly with its arms over, it's not a big deal if you can't get to them. You find on these jackets there's 3 rows, right, left and centre. A few brass areas to pick out. But of the rifle, there's a little hinged door there that I kept leather for wrapping the bullets in. Towards the end of the rifle as well, I might find a bit of a brass fitting at the end of the wood. Handle of the sword bayonet, tip of the scabbard there. The bugle shaped badge on the blanket on the shackle. What he's holding here is a powder horn, which would have brass fittings at the ends. It's covered by his hand. If I was going to paint that, if it was not being held, probably the same colour as the canvas blanket, where I used the worn stone. I'm going to do some washes on the model. I'm going to target different areas of the model, but you could do one all over wash. I'd probably recommend the dark tone that I'm using first if you're doing everything. But the dark tone, I'm going to target the uniform, the overalls, the rifle, shackle, and backpack. One advantage of using this very, very dark grey Raven Black primer is that you can actually shade it with a sort of a black coloured wash. Just helps bring it to life rather than it just being all a flat black. One thing I neglected to say was that the dark tone has been diluted equal parts dark tone with Speedpaint medium. This is light tone. I'm using it for the canvas bag. It just makes it look a bit warmer. This is strong skin shade. The dark tone could have been used over the whole model if you wanted to save time and money on not having too many shades. But something like dark tone tends to sort of wash out the colours of the face. This is a warmer wash, so it works better. It's also quite handy for areas of brass as well, so sort of the redness that's in it works well, keeping the nice warm metallic colour. Got all the washes dried now. Model looks a bit shiny at this point, don't worry, we'll knock that back with the highlights and then some varnish later. My first highlights are simply reapplying the base colours. I'm not going to spend loads of time covering over the whole surface again, really concentrating on anywhere that's looking upwards or is on the edge of a fold or a crease. And this just helps to contrast with the shadowy areas in the recesses where the wash is settled. So I'll go around with all the base colours and come back after that's done. Couldn't do a second round of highlights after reapplying all the base colours. So Fanatic Guardian Green, for the jacket cords and plume. The facings can be highlighted with Angelic red. Browns I'm highlighting with Bootstrap brown. I'm using Dryad brown to add a tiny little highlight to the wood of the rifle. Arctic Gem is going to highlight the canteen. Trying to do vertical lines to make it look a bit like wood and around the rim. This is Uniform Grey. I'm going to give his skin a bit more attention. So I've popped in the eyes with a bit of the worn stone. This is Barbarian Flesh. So be another highlight layer to come. Highlight I'll finish with on the skin is Ruby Skin. And lastly, one of my favourite ways really just to finish off a face is with a bit of 5 o'clock shadow. So this is a glaze of field grey from the Army Painter. This is from the War Paints range, the original range. A glaze is just thinned with water. A bit too much on there, I'll just absorb it with a dry brush. It'll probably take a couple of coats to get this desired effect. Here's the stills of the finished model. The base has been finished with some 2mm tufts from Gamer's Grass. I like how this has turned out. I think he looks rugged enough to be believable as somebody who's been on campaign in the peninsula for a few months. The Wargames Atlantic kit is quite nice. I'm delighted to say that I'm now affiliate of Wargames Atlantic, and there's a link in the description below. So if you want to buy some of their stuff and would like to support this channel at the same time, please consider purchasing through the link. Won't cost you anything extra, but does send a little bit of money my way. If you want to support the channel in other ways, you can become a member through YouTube or on Patreon or Ko-fi, and every little bit of support helps by getting plunged back into more models and more paints to keep making these painting tutorials. If you've got any comments, please leave them below, and I'll be back soon with another video. Bye for now.